Hello, everybody. Brett Rice, Core Vision Financial Group, coming to you today with another episode in our series on financial topics. Today, I'm joined by Andrea Lee, but she is going to be the host of the episode. Today, we're going to talk about financial literacy, as April is Financial Literacy Month. Go to YouTube, go to our Core Vision Financial Group YouTube page, subscribe to our videos so you're notified when we post a new one, as we continue to grow this library and get more topics out there. Again, contact information will be at the end of the video. Please feel free to reach out at any point. Thank you for watching.
Hi,
Andrea,
Brett.
go ahead. It's all you.
Hey, Brett.
Hey, didn't we just do this?
We did. We did. Yeah, we need to spread out our time together because
Well, we're always back to back on the
I know.
months when it's...
we need to change that. We need to change that schedule. But, okay, so Financial Literacy Month, April. What does that mean?
So, Financial Literacy Month. You know, it's just kind of an opportunity to bring light to, hey, you know, we all could use a little more information on, you know, financial topics, how, especially the younger you are, on more of these topics, how car loans work, how mortgages work, you know, credit card interest rates, all of that stuff. Because, you know, the more of that information you have, the better decision-making possibilities that you have, as opposed to just saying, well, it is what it is, so that's just what I got to take. I recently spent some time at the high school, you know, talking about budgeting and, you know, kind of just how money works with kids. And to see their eyes light up when you go through how a mortgage works and how an interest rate difference is a huge number at the end of 30 years, people just couldn't believe it. They just thought that my math was incorrect. And I'm like, it's not my math. We were using a website.
I feel like
you know?
I wish. I wish that
I
was the
wish.
case.
You know, because what we were originally talking about was your credit score
Yes.
and how that impacts so much in your life.
Totally my wheelhouse right now. My husband is literally buying a car today.
Yeah.
And so that has been our conversation for the last week.
Yeah. And, you know, these kids obviously don't really have any experience with a credit score. You know, most of them, I'll say 95% of them have no credit history.
Right.
I think there were 2 kids in the 6 classes I sat in that either had a credit card with a small limit that they were using to do that, or they were an authorized user on somebody else's card to try to do that. Which, I mean, these kids were juniors and seniors in high school, so that's very young to be getting in with credit cards and stuff. But it was more the idea. They were telling me that it was the idea of trying to build their credit. So when they graduated high school, they were already hit the ground running.
So, personal experience, that was what we did when I went to college. I didn't have credit, so to establish that, we got a card in my name. We had to have my dad as a co-signer. But anyway, that way, like, I bought all my books, and granted, I don't think kids buy books anymore.
Right.
But those things, and so it was things that we would have bought anyway, but that way it was establishing some sort of credit history so that when it was time to buy my own car, I could do that.
Right. So you would already have had some credit at that point. And, you know, I think my daughter's already done the same thing, right? She's got a credit card with a small limit that she uses to try to establish her credit. She's a junior in college, right? So she's getting ready to turn 21. So she's starting to get to that age where, hey, this is going to be an everyday occurrence for her now.
Well, and things start to matter, right? Like her
Right.
apartment is going to go toward her credit history and those types of things.
For sure.
So, yeah, just educating the youth and knowing that the decisions do come back to either help or haunt you, depending
Right.
on how they go.
And in that class, what we were talking about is how where your credit score falls on that number range, how that impacts the interest rate you get on your credit and what that payment difference it is. So when you look at it, you know, trying to getting these kids to understand early on, I mean, the things you're doing today are going to impact you for a long time. So being very aware of what, you know, getting a credit card and not paying it, or not paying a bill that you get, how that can impact your credit score for a very long time. So that was a good experience, you know, and, you know, that's, I think, one of the starting points, right, in financial literacy, right? I think, like, you know, getting basic in the beginning. Hey, let's start a budget. Let's use a budget to figure out, hey, how's this all going to work? You know, it makes you more aware of your spending, your income, all of these different things that right? You start being, oh, okay, I know there's a bill coming. I got money, blah, blah, all of these things, because you just know what your budget looks like, how much income, those type of things.
Lots of times, even still in my marriage, I tell my husband, don't pay attention to the balance in our checking account because we don't have that much, because I know what's coming in, right?
Right, for sure.
So, yeah. All right, so you keep mentioning a budget. I feel like this is your space. Like, I feel like if I have any budget questions, you are my budget nerd that I go to, because I don't know anyone that loves a budget as much as Brett Rice.
I'm such a scatterbrain that's what keeps me on track. I use it. I like to make fun of Jenny and Sandy for using the checkbook register, but it's my checkbook register.
Yeah, that's fair.
Right, I shade them green when they've gone through the bank. When I list out everything that's coming out, it's funny. Different colors mean different things for me. So let me take a step back. A budget is a great way for people to get, very familiar with where their money's going. Like I'm discussing right now, I use it as a checklist to make sure all those bills get paid, because I just will forget about something and not pay it. Forget about, auto pay is a good thing. I would say probably 50 to 60% of my bills are set up on auto pay, but I still go through that budget and I color code them when they clear the bank. And then as I'm going through it, I'm like, well, why is that one not came out yet? Or whatever. And then you got to go look into it and say, hey, what's going on here? But I use that for me personally to just stay on top of all of those things. It's a way for me to verify that all the transactions in my banking are legitimate. Because that's something we have to worry about, fraud all the time. So as I'm going through there all the time, I'll be like, what's this charge? I'll have to call Tiffany and be like, hey, did you do something? She'll be like, oh, yeah, I used a vending machine, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, just checking.
Okay, so I have the same. We put everything on our credit card and then just pay it once at the end of the month. But same thing. I go through that bill and I check it, and I have to call Jason and ask those questions. Do you feel like a dad or a parent? Like, I
would like to consider myself a good steward of money.
That's where it's coming from, 100%.
Right.
But sometimes I feel like when I make those phone calls and I'm like, hey, this is weird, I feel like automatically, like, there's a defensive nature on the other side. And I'm like, no, it's fine. Like, you're an adult.
Right.
But it's just my responsibility to make sure that...
Oh, yeah, because the feedback I get sometimes is, why are you questioning every decision? I'm like,
it's not that.
That's not it. I'm just making sure this is legitimate.
Right, yeah.
Because I can tell you what, there have been those $1...
Yeah, absolutely.
Google, when you add a card to your phone, Google Pay, Apple Pay, all of those things, they'll send a transaction to make sure it goes through and the connection works. My bank will shut it down thinking it's fraud, because they'll send 2 or 3.
Yep.
Next thing you know, your debit card's locked, your bank account's locked.
And all your bills are late.
You're like, I'm trying to do the right thing here, people.
All right.
But a budget, I think it is an easy first step. You talked about, I use a spreadsheet. It's a very simple tool. A lot of people think mine is very difficult and confusing, but they've not spent the time in it that I have. I mean, I use the same budget form that I started, it's probably 5 years ago now. It might even be 6 years ago now. And it's just gotten more detailed over time. Sure. Right? I think some of it is you start doing it and you're like, well, why am I not accounting for this thing? Why am I not putting this thing in? And then the next thing you know, you have a 47 line item budget and you're going through it, and it's more like a profit loss statement.
But I will say, when I get budgets all the time from a planning standpoint, like, because people don't want to fill out the paperwork, so they'll be like, I'll just send you my budget.
Right.
The more detailed it is, the less questions I have, because just like you said, it makes sense to you, but it may not make sense to your spouse or somebody else who's looking at it.
So in a budget meeting, I have my computer out. I'm looking at my spreadsheet. Tiffany's sitting over here with a notepad.
Because that's her ledger that works for her.
Writing it down in pencil that she'll never look at again. But then she feels like she knows the budget and she's good to go.
Hey,
and
she's checked in.
Right. 100%. She participates. She's there. It's just, you can make those two things work, right? Mm-hmm. She can do the budget her way. You can do the budget yours, and they can still align.
Yes. The importance is that you're both involved and you're both like paying attention, know what's going on.
Right.
Right?
100%. Right. Then it's everybody's engaged, everybody's aware. It's not one person's fault.
Well, and not to be Debbie Downer, but stuff happens.
Yeah,
in
for
the
sure.
event that the person who typically is in charge of all those things were to get sick or pass or something awful would happen, that other person knows what's going on, which makes that less stressful, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, this is also assuming that we have a, 2-person household.
Right.
You can budget on your own, too.
Oh, it's much easier to do it by yourself.
All right. So we've established our budget.
Hang on. I want to
Okay.
give an example of something real
Sure.
quick. In 2023, I believe it was, my stepmom passed away. My dad hadn't written a check in 43 years. He was so far away from the budget, he had no clue what was going on.
Okay.
And he came to me and he said, Brett, I haven't written a check in 43 years.
Did you say, let me call Jenny?
No. I was like, we're going to stop writing checks. We're going to put all this stuff on autopay. But, that becomes the problem. And, I think we've talked about this in the past. When one spouse is so out of touch with what's going on and something happens to the spouse that is, you're basically back to square one. My dad had no idea how much his mortgage was, car payment, he had no idea. He didn't even know who was the insurance agent on that stuff.
Yeah.
So it was a
On top
real
of
task.
dealing with the loss.
On top, he's not giving himself any opportunity to grieve the loss because he's immediately like, hey, I don't know what's going on with this bill.
Yeah.
He'd be like, hey, here's a whole stack of mail. Can you go through it for me? And you'd be like, oh my gosh. So then you get, right. Work as a team. If you're a 2-person household, both people should be on board. And if one doesn't want to be, they need to be. It's just a conversation of what happens if I'm not here tomorrow.
Well, and I think something that you bring up also is a great point with aging parents, because unfortunately that's, where we're headed. I think it's always good to have somebody else looking at that, right?
100%.
So if you have a spouse that's already passed and so now you are single again, probably wouldn't be a bad idea to bring one of your kids in and just be like, hey, this is where everything is. Been through that with my father-in-law. When he passed, we knew nothing. And so we were, just scrambling to try and figure out what to do, what existed, where it was. And so luckily we had a little help. But yeah, that grieving process is important, and allowing yourself to do that.
I was very lucky to the fact that Susan, my stepmother, had a 3-ring binder, and she had been handwriting down bills that she paid for years. But in there was also a page that said account numbers and phone numbers to call.
So important.
Oh, it was, I don't keep track of account numbers and phone numbers to call. Mm-hmm. So she may have had a level of detail I didn't.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even worry about, but right, mine are all logins on web pages.
Yeah. Well, and half the time your account numbers, they won't show you the whole number on there.
Right.
So it's hard sometimes to even get them.
Yeah. So it was super helpful that she had all of that stuff
Sure.
written down.
All right. Moving on. We got a budget. We've established it. Now what?
So once, and you can kind of do some of these in different orders because I'm not sure, this isn't cookie cutter for everybody.
Sure.
Some people don't like to do things in the same order as others for whatever reason and stuff. So I have these conversations with people where I'm like, just because this is the way I did it doesn't mean that that's what you're going to be comfortable with. Do these things, and some of them need to be done in a certain order,
Right.
but some of them don't have to be. Build an emergency fund, right? Educate yourself on how much money you should have in an emergency fund.
What's the purpose of an emergency fund?
Well, it's to cover emergencies. It's to take all the up and down out of your budget, right? So your budget's going along and all of a sudden car breaks down. It's $1,500 to fix the engine. Instead of having to say, hey, that $1,500 has got to come out of April's budget, you say, well, we got this emergency fund over here that allows us to keep moving along on the budget. We can take the money out of this emergency fund and then start saving again to replace it. But it's to eliminate all the noise, all in your budget. So you still can make all the other payments, regularly like you would. You have the money set aside, and it allows you to keep living your life as you have been.
I have always looked at an emergency fund as a stress saver because
for sure.
That way when like something happens, and all kinds of things happen, right? Life
Storm
happens.
damage.
Loss of job.
Insurance premiums, or deductibles.
Sure. So all those things that happen, they're not so scary or so emotional if you've planned for it. Because that's essentially what an emergency fund is, right?
100%.
It's planning for what you don't know is going to happen, but you're planning for that.
Right.
So
because it's going to happen.
Something is going to happen. So, yeah. If you I personally, my husband has a job that is kind of risky, not necessarily like in his life, but in just the
employment.
Market. Yeah, like the market itself. So currently, we have about a year's savings as our emergency fund. That's a lot. But there have been times where we've gone through where we've needed it.
Right,
so
right.
For us, that's what makes sense. For somebody else, that may not make any sense.
Right.
So
typically they say 3 to 6 months to help you get through, like you said, job loss, sickness, illness, those things. So for 3 to 6 months, you could continue paying your bills as you had without interruption while you try to manage through this issue, whether it's a job loss, illness, storm, all these different things that can happen that are emergencies, accidents, whatever, without, throwing the rest of your life in chaos.
Right. Keeping that stress level low. All right. So you mentioned debt, loans, interest rates.
Yeah. I think understanding how debt works is huge. Most people don't understand, like we talked about a mortgage earlier, the amount of interest that you pay back on a 30-year home mortgage is eye-opening. I mean, it'll make you go, no, there's no way I'm paying. That's how much I'm paying back. Especially the first time you see one, you see that amortization schedule, and you're like, no, this has got to be. I must not understand how this works. And then you're like, no, that's exactly how it works.
Yeah, because they got to make money on you using their money, right? That's
Right.
what that all goes back to.
Right. But understanding how credit cards work, how that interest works.
Yeah.
Understanding 25% interest is super high.
It's awful.
Yeah, it's so high.
Yeah, that's why, in my opinion, you just try and not put anything on there you can't pay for anyway.
Right.
Like,
And
we use it for points, but that's it.
Yeah, and people use a lot of different mindsets about, hey, is it okay to put this on a credit card? I saw something the other day where somebody said, if I can't afford to pay for it twice, then I can't afford it. So, whether that's on a credit card or on a debit card or however you want to credit, cash, they just said, if I buy that, what they normally do is tell themselves they need to put the same amount in savings, right? I mean, depending upon what you're buying, yeah, that makes sense because you really want yourself to feel the pain of that, to say, no, I've really got to think through these decisions if I'm putting something on credit. A lot of people, like you talked about your situation, put it on credit, but then you're paying it off. A lot of people don't have that discipline.
Yeah.
And, other things happen. That may be your plan. But then flat tire, sick child, there's all these things that come up every day that throw a monkey wrench into that. So understanding debt management and how that works is huge. There's nothing wrong with, getting a mortgage, getting a car payment, but you need to understand how that loan is going to work. How much interest are you going to pay that bank while you use their money? Understand it. I'm not saying that, let that deter you when you look at it and you say, oh my gosh, that's too much. Well, every bank out there is probably the same interest rate or very near each other.
But knowing that do you still need that item when you know you're going to pay that much more for it?
Right.
Sometimes, yes. Like cars, they're going to help you get to your job. So,
for sure.
And there's good debt and there's bad debt, right? Like typically a mortgage is going to be good debt. A 25% interest rate probably not going to be good debt if you're holding a balance on that credit card.
And also, let's talk about you see a lot of times 12 months same as cash and stuff. Make sure you educate yourself on what that is. Read that thing so you understand 12 months same as cash doesn't mean you don't make a payment for 12 months.
Right.
You're still going to have a minimum payment every month that you're going to have to pay.
Or you should to get the benefit of the 12 months same as cash.
Right. Because if you miss a payment, all that interest kicks in.
Right.
There's just all these things. Understand that if you don't make it, what's that interest going to go to? Understand what that makes that thing cost that you're doing 12 months same as cash. What would it cost if all that interest kicked in? And then is it still a good deal?
Right.
Because, there's a possibility it may. So just understand it.
Well, and I think that helps you be more disciplined too, right? If you understand what happens if you don't follow the rules or the plan, it helps you stay on track.
Well, some people are going to be like, well, I don't understand that terminology that's in those contracts. I don't understand. Listen, they make it easy because it's their benefit. What they don't want you to do is reading through that and going, oh, wait, I have to make a monthly payment, and if I miss one 8 months in, all of that interest kicks in. You need to understand those things just so you're aware.
Right.
Because you don't want to get surprised by, hey, I did miss a payment 8 months in, and now all of a sudden this $2,000 thing is $3,000.
Right.
Just understand what you're signing up for.
So we kind of talked about this last month.
Right.
Just educating yourself on investments. And I know it was technically geared toward females, but I think it works no matter your gender. Yeah, investments.
Most people generally have some type of retirement savings through their work. Educate yourself on what is in that plan. We meet with people all the time that are like, hey, I don't know what's in this. And you're like, no, okay, that's what we're here for.
Right. I prefer that with my clients because that's a tool that I have in my toolbox.
Right. I think it's a wonderful tool, to say, hey, can you explain to me what this target date fund is in my retirement
Should I be
plan?
in that?
Yeah. That's what we're here for.
Right.
We love to help educate people on stuff like this. But, starting with that, because that's something a lot of people have, is a retirement plan.
Making sure you're taking advantage of free money from your employer. All kinds of things. And that's, I think, where we're nerds.
There are plenty of resources available out on YouTube where you can go and figure out, hey, what's a stock, a bond, a mutual fund, an ETF,
We probably have that in a topic.
We probably do have that in a topic also. What is a 401k? What's an IRA? What's a Roth IRA? Just kind of generally understanding what
makes sense for me.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then reach out to an investment advisor and say, hey, explain to me, what these things are. If I start buying into this, what am I getting myself
Am I
into?
eligible for this?
Yep.
Those types of things. Because you may not be, depending on income levels and all kinds of stuff. All right. So then everybody's favorite topic, taxes.
Taxes. Hey, guess what? It's tax month also.
It is.
Not only is it financial literacy month, April 15th is creeping up on us. So understanding how taxes work is a huge thing for people. Most people don't understand how the taxes work. Say you're in the 22% tax bracket. Well, what does that mean? People don't understand that your entire income isn't taxed at 22%, right? There's a marginal tax rate and an effective tax rate and all of these things that, the first $10,000 or $11,000 of your income's taxed at 0. You get above that to the next bracket is 10, it moves through there.
Well, and there are ways to lower your tax bracket.
Right, 100%. Hey, if I make a contribution to a 529 in the state of Indiana, I get a 20% tax credit.
And I keep that money. So not only am I not paying it to the government, I'm actually investing it for my kids' future, my future, whatever.
But again, I'm going to recommend that you look at reliable resources and utilize professionals.
Sure.
Tax professionals are the best resource to go to say, hey, what can I do to help improve my tax situation?
And we can help in that space too, right? We can always recommend tax professionals if you don't know who to go to. So something you had touched on before with auto pay and those things. Mm-hmm. So you can also automate your savings, right?
Right.
So what's the benefit of that?
out of sight, out of mind, right? If it's automated, you don't have to think about doing, so then you can't forget it because it's done automatically.
It's like a bill. You
Right. There's a school of thought out there that says pay yourself first. That savings needs to come out of there first. A lot of people say, well, what's left over is what I save. Well, that's, it's evolved to, no, if I pay myself first, it comes out. It's not, instead of saving $50, well, there's only $35 left, so all I get this month is $35. And then you squeeze your savings right out of it. Mm-hmm. So automating it to say, hey, that $50 comes out first thing. I know I get paid every 2 weeks. Yep. Every 2 weeks, that $50 coming out. It just helps you not have to think about it. You can't forget it.
Right.
All that type of stuff. Not only automating your savings, your investments, your 401k, all of that stuff. Sure. Auto raise every year when
yes.
If your job gives you a cost of living raise or you get an increase your savings.
Yeah, and a lot of 401k plans now have like a little box you can click that you want to increase by 1% each year.
Every January 1st or whatever it is. Yeah.
Now you got to watch that too to make sure you're not over the max. But
right, which is a whole nother situation.
Sure. Let's say I've got more questions. Where maybe could I go to other than Brett Rice? Where could I go to for help?
Again, the internet is a great source. There's so much good information on the internet. Some websites like NerdWallet, Investopedia, those are resources that I use, mm-hmm. When I'm like, hey, what's the best CD rates out there? What's current mortgage rates? I'll use multiple sources. I'll look at local banks. Because there's a lot of information out there on the internet also that's incomplete. They don't tell you the whole story. They're like, there's all these, and I'm going to say they're scams because they're trying to get you to buy something without telling you the whole story. So you have to be aware of that stuff on the internet. But as far as doing research, I would say anytime you look anything up, use 2 or 3 sources just to make sure that they're very similar.
Just like if you have a doctor that tells you that you have a need for some super expensive surgery.
Get a second opinion. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that.
All right, so we've talked about saving and all those budgeting things. Maybe one thing to also consider is goals, right? So in order to know what we're saving for,
right,
we need to set some goals.
Yeah, and we have short-term goals, long-term goals. Right. For younger adults getting started, a long-term goal is probably buying a house.
Sure.
So we're going to start saving for that. And we know, hey, at some point, we want to have as close to 20% down on a home to get us there, to get us, not paying that PMI and all of that stuff. So set financial goals, whether it's, hey, I want to get to 3 months worth of savings. Then that goal becomes 6 months worth of savings or whatever your example is, saving for a new car, saving for kids going to college. There's so many goals out there that you start getting into it. All of a sudden you're like, whoa, I got a bunch of goals that I'm saving for.
Right. Don't get overwhelmed.
Right.
That's why we do that. That's why we set these and then we put things on automation
right.
And then they just kind of set it and forget it. Retirement is a goal that everyone needs to be saving for, right?
Long-term goal.
Yep. On here you have to use the SMART principle. Can you explain that?
SMART goals, right? I always mess this up. Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Right? You don't want to create a goal that says, I want to save $50. But you don't put a time frame on it to where you say, hey, in the next 2 weeks, I want to save $50. Mm-hmm. That's going to be like, oh, okay, now I know my goal is in 2 weeks. Specific, measurable, $50, 2 weeks. Meets all of those goals. So when you say something, hey, I want to save $100. Well, in the next 5 years or, 5 months, 5 days, mm-hmm. where are we at on that?
Right.
So just that way you have some accountability to yourself. I think a lot of people walk through some of these, right? They're like, I'm the only person who knows about this. So it doesn't matter if it takes me 2 months instead of 2 weeks to get to that goal. But, that just gives you the opportunity to say, this is important to me, mm-hmm. and I want to achieve this.
Right. You set the goals. So that you bring exactly. That's what's important to you.
Yep.
And
for sure.
Somebody else doesn't need to set your goals for you. Talking about money, It's what we do all day long.
Right.
But most people don't.
And most people are not comfortable.
Well, you're taught not to be.
We reach out to people all the time and say, hey, let's talk about retirement planning. I had someone one time tell me, that's like letting you look through my underwear drawer.
Wow.
And I'm like, I don't think that's what it's like.
That's not how I see it.
I don't think those two are similar.
The vulnerability.
Yes, the vulnerability. And I have some very close friends in my life that I've had for 40 years. We'll talk about money. And I'm like, yeah, we talk about money. But my wife and her friends, they talk about money.
Good.
Like me and my friends are talking about it at a more high level. I feel like my wife and her friends are talking about, openly discussing everything that goes on as far as money's concerned. And I'm like, we probably don't really talk about money over here in the same. Yeah, because they're down in the nitty gritty details of how much every single thing costs. And over here, we're talking in generalities about, how much everything is and stuff. And so, like you said, we've grown up in this environment where it's like, you don't tell people how much you make. You don't tell people how much your house payment is, car payments, because you don't want people to judge you for it. You don't want people to look at you as like, oh, they make all this money, or oh, they don't make any money. And
right.
I think it's good to have people that you can talk to about those things.
Well, and everything that comes through our doors is confidential, right? Like.
Oh yeah, as far as us in here, yes,
sure.
Absolutely.
So that's a safe space if that's not something that you are comfortable. Because I don't know that I still would want to just air everything. Now with my parents, yeah. My family, yeah, absolutely, because they're going to find out anyway if something happens to me, so they might as well know. But
but my wife will, every detail. She's got a couple of friends that are very close. They know almost every single detail of her life. Yeah. And I'm like, you share all.
Yeah, and that is unique. But there's a comfort level, right? And everybody's is different. For sure. There are people that are uncomfortable having doctors in Shelbyville because they live here.
Right.
There are people uncomfortable with advisors in Shelbyville because they live here. So I get it. It's different for everybody. Anything that comes through our door is confidential. So
yeah, and that's any conversation I have with somebody. I'm not turning around and then going out to down on the square downtown and being like, "Hey, somebody told me."
Well, and in all fairness, at the moment when we're having the conversation, I'm paying attention and I know what's happening. The second that conversation is over, I have forgotten. I may remember the percentages and those things, but the actual value, that's irrelevant because I'm typically talking about percentages anyway.
But I agree with you. That's something historically people have been told you don't share that information. But I think there's a level of accountability. You start sharing that information with people, then you're like, yeah, I probably should clean that up.
Yeah. Well, it also, if you care about your friends, making sure that they are contributing to their 401ks, those types of things, those are good conversations to have. Are you maxing that out? Well, no. Should I be? Well, I don't know. This is, and granted, I think you should always utilize an educated source, not necessarily your buddy, unless it's a situation where he or she is educated in that space. But having those conversations are definitely beneficial.
Right, we talk about the barracks lawyer. I don't know if you're familiar with that term or not, but it's it comes from a long time ago. You'd have this one guy in the barrack, the military barrack. Everybody lives in the same. He'd be the guy that'd be sitting over there talking like he knows the law and legal and all that. And then you'd be, 2 or 3 people tell that story. It's a telephone game.
Sure.
Now your information isn't as accurate as it may have been. It's like, the person next to you at work saying, hey, my 401k's in the 2045 target date fund. And you're like, oh, okay, that's what I'm going to put mine in because that's what his in. Your age gap is 20 years and yours should have been in the 2065. Right?
Sure.
It's
absolutely
not everybody's situation is the same. The same investments don't necessarily fit your risk tolerance, your profile, your time horizon. All of those things.
Sure.
We talk about this almost every time, right?
Right. But but I think that also touches on its importance. And what's the takeaway?
This is a long-term project, right? You're gonna deal with financial literacy the rest of your life. Credit scores, interest rates, all of those things, savings, money markets, investments, all of those things from now until you're not here anymore. So it's
hopefully that can, if you do it right, it continues, right?
Right.
We have some generations
on past when you're not here,
and all those things.
And so you're going to deal with it in every transaction going forward. Credit scores, like I just said, credit scores, credit balances, all of those things are going to impact you. So being educated on what because the problem is you get into a little bit of trouble with them, then you feel overwhelmed as you try to learn what it is. Hey, what's going on? What am I got myself involved in? And it's like an avalanche.
Right. Well, and then it's like la 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 la
right.
la la. Yeah.
Bury my head in the sand until this passes, and then we're going to move on.
Right. And don't let that happen, because it's not the huge mountain that it seems. This is something, even when it's a bad day, everybody goes through.
Yep.
And there are ways to get through it, but sometimes you need a coach. That's what we're for.
Yep. Start young.
Yep.
Start understanding credit scores, credit balances, and interest as early as possible. So as you go through life, you feel more educated and you feel more confident when, okay, I know by doing this transaction, this is what I'm signing myself up for. Not that it's good or bad, but just understanding it.
Right. Well, and that you fully understand what your commitment is, right?
For sure.
Thanks, Brett. You
Andrea,
feel like
thanks for joining me. Yeah, I'm pretty wound up right now.
You're going to go look at your budget, aren't you?
I got some things to do, but I'm sure I'll look at it at some point today. Again, everybody, Brett Rice, Andrea Lee, Core Vision Financial Group. Thanks for spending some time with us on this financial topic, financial literacy for the month of April. Again, contact information at the end of the video. Go to our YouTube page and subscribe to our videos so you're notified when we post a new one. Again, thanks for spending time with us.